You are listening to A Scary State, and this week we're talking about Minnesota. So, Lauren?
Yes, Kenzie.
Let's get scary.
So
you should say Sally sells
Sally
seashells down.
Sally sells I'm nervous now. Seashells by the seashore.
Sally
sells seashells by the seashore. It doesn't sound that bad. Okay, I had to get Invisalign because my teeth had moved. For all of you who had braces in the middle school time and you're around our age, people got that permanent retainer behind the forefront bottom teeth. I had that for 15 years. And so because of that, the teeth in the middle started to move because there's nothing supporting them. And so it was
you mean on the side?
No, these ones.
But that's where the bar is.
The bar didn't connect to those. It was behind them.
Yes.
Yeah, but it didn't have an individual connection on each of them. It was just a straight bar across. So these teeth had nothing holding them there. So they started to move a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't know.
Yeah, I know. So with it, my teeth changed a little bit. And so with how I now bite, my bite has changed. And my dentist was like, if you don't fix it now, it's going to be an issue in the future. So we're going to fix it now so it's not an issue. So I fixed it. That's why I have Invisalign. But you want to hear something weird that I noticed? Okay. I have never taken drugs, so I don't know the sensation. People biting and needing to bite and grind their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So I was like, oh, that's a weird thing. I wonder if this is how people on drugs feel. I don't know.
Depends on the drug.
Exactly. See, that's what I was figuring. But so I had this urge to bite and this need to bite. And so I looked it up online and there's a whole Reddit thread about people who have gotten Invisalign who have had to bite things. And so they were like, oh, there's these chewies you can get online. And it's literally just a little piece of plastic that you can keep chewing so that it helps with your need to bite something.
Why? Does it hurt?
No. I don't know what it is. My jaw just needs to bite. And it doesn't happen when the Invisalign's out. It's just when it's in. And I just need to bite something. So I was talking to my coworker about it and his wife's pregnant. He's like, I have a ton of teething toys if you need them.
Well,
I think thanks so much.
Versatile.
But it's just the weirdest feeling. I've never had this need to bite. And then I had a dream that I was eating chips. But with my Invisalign in. And then I woke up and I was grinding my teeth like I was eating chips.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a need to bite, as in it's an involuntary clenching of the teeth.
Yeah, which is the biting. It's you bite because you're clenching your teeth. The best way I could describe it is needing to bite.
Yeah, it's because you don't do drugs.
I do not. But it's so uncomfortable.
Well, usually if someone does drugs long enough, that sensation goes away eventually.
So I'm hoping this goes away eventually.
I would suggest chewing gum because that's usually what I do, but
you can't
do that.
On. So that's why I was gonna get the chewies.
You could get a Polly Pocket.
Chew on the clothes. Yeah. Did you do that when you were younger?
Of course I did.
I did too.
I chewed on everything. Do you remember we must have been friends at that time. If I got a straw in a drink.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, I actually used to bite my straws too.
That shit was flat.
I have come a long way from that. I don't know when it stopped, but it did stop.
When I no longer gave myself a straw.
Well, even now, if I go out to eat and I get a straw, I don't bite it anymore.
That's because I'm talking.
So if someone's just telling you a story, you would just bite the whole thing flat?
I don't remember what I actually did. I just remember doing it. The straw honestly was probably just in my mouth, not even in the cup.
And then the cups that were kind of plasticky and papery, I would bite around the rim too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You really went to town.
I know.
I didn't do that.
Maybe that's why my teeth are so jacked up.
The front ones anyway, for sure. See, my issue was the back. But my issue now is that my teeth just have gotten spaced out.
Yeah, no, my issue now is my bite. I bite really hard on one side, barely on the other side. And then some of my teeth in the front don't touch and other ones do. And it's just a whole issue.
Every time I've gone to the dentist, they told me that my bite is fine.
Oh, well, good.
I haven't been to the dentist in quite some time.
So there, the eye doctor.
Yeah. And school year started, so, now
So now there's no hope.
No, I don't have time. Well, and at this point, I'm pretty sure I have this little window here where I don't have health insurance. So
when you first start, you don't have health insurance?
No, apparently not.
That is the weirdest thing to me.
Apparently it doesn't kick in until after the first month, I guess.
I think that is so stupid.
Especially because I was technically hired in March.
Yeah.
So,
Like when Joe used to work more construction-y jobs, the first 90 days that you work, you don't have insurance.
oh yeah, no, it
And
was
so it's like,
30.
I'm sorry, you're working in a construction job and you don't have insurance. And of course, in those 90 days is when you got kidney stones
Yeah, well, who knows
before we were married.
who's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen in the next 30?
Well, let's not say that. All right, let's jump into Minnesota.
Okay.
Well, 250,000 people visit Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness annually.
That's a name.
Yep. I did it with my. Oh my God. I was talking the other day at work on like Tuesday when I had first gotten them in, and I said a word and I was like, whew, that did not sound good because I was showing them I was normal.
Yeah, that snap you sent me were like, it's fine. And whatever word you said did not come out fine. I was like, okay, buddy.
I was like, oh yeah, that didn't sound too good. Millions of people visit this place annually. You're not likely to get jostled by crowds here. The area runs for nearly 150 miles in northeastern Minnesota alongside Canada's Quetico Provincial Park. Long ago, the landscape was scraped and gouged by glaciers, leaving behind thousands of lakes and streams. With 1,200 miles of canoe routes, the easiest way to explore is by water and portage. Portage. I think it's called portage.
I don't know what that is.
It's carrying your gear over the land that connects the waterways. So to watch this guy, he has like a YouTube channel and he does that. He'll ride a river and then he'll portage it where he grabs all of his canoe and stuff and walks this water, like this land area, and then gets back in the water and keeps going. He calls it a portage. This other YouTuber we watch calls it a portage.
Okay.
You learn something new every day.
Every day.
Explore for a day or go for many weeks. There is no way to see everything, which is its own kind of invitation. Ooh. The first people probably came to the area now called Minnesota around 12,000 years ago. Native American tribes, including the Arapaho, Ojibwe, Dakota Sioux, Cheyenne, Iowa, Omaha, Winnebago, among others, lived on the land many centuries later. Minnesota is bordered by Canada in the north, Lake Superior and Wisconsin in the east, Iowa in the south, and North and South Dakota in the west. Okay, for a second I was trying to think of Minnesota, and I was like, is Iowa near Minnesota? It is. Minnesota's like the chef hat, and Iowa's like the little face with the nose. Most of the state's topography, or the shape of the terrain, was created thousands of years ago by glaciers. These slow-moving masses of ice carved out Minnesota's plains and low hills. They also created the state's many lakes. Legend has it, giant lumberjack Paul Bunyan and his blue ox created Minnesota's lakes with his footprints. But the lakes are actually created by melting glaciers, not his footprints.
Spoiler alert.
The far southeastern part of the state is the only area that wasn't affected by glaciers during the last ice age. It has stream-cut valleys, caverns, and high bluffs. Northern Minnesota boasts deep lakes and streams, rocky ridges, thick forests, and the state's highest point, Eagle Mountain. The area borders Lake Superior, the world's largest freshwater lake by surface area. Minnesota's Mesabi Mountain Range has been a huge producer of iron ore. The state is also known for mining manganese, which is used to make aluminum and steel and can also be found in batteries.
All things that are appropriate for manganese to be in.
Yes. Yes. This one we can support.
Yes. I don't know what manganese is, but
magnesium, I think.
No, I think magnesium is magnesium.
Well, it's similar to it.
They're both chemical elements with different atomic number. Okay, that doesn't help.
So they're different. That's all that we got from
manganese helps the body form connective tissue, bones. Okay.
Maybe I read something else and it wasn't manganese that I was confusing with magnesium.
Oh, you do need to consume both of them in your diet.
Oh, good.
Interesting.
Science lesson.
So maybe you were right. Maybe they are very similar. They're both minerals and you find them through food.
Okay, so maybe that's what it was. It's that they were similar.
Yes.
That's what put the connection in my brain.
Well, it doesn't help that they're also spelled
really similar. Downtown Minneapolis has a 9-mile-long system of above-ground walkways that stretches between city buildings. Connecting more than 73 blocks, it's considered the world's biggest skyway. Minnesota spans 86,936 square miles, or 225,163 square kilometers, making it the 12th largest state of America, right between Michigan and Utah in terms of size. Interesting. If Minnesota were a country, it would be similar in size to Laos, or twice as large as Honduras. What this means is
2.
Count them, 2
Hondurases could fit in Minnesota. And that is Minnesota for you.
So annoying.
What spooky tea you pulling, Lauren?
Okay, so I know that we have covered a couple people, like true crimey people, recently. But looking back over Minnesota, we have only covered haunted places and urban legends.
Well, my person is not a true crimey person.
Oh, well.
So
Good.
There'll be a little
So
mix
I
up.
decided we're just going to throw a true crime in here. And
Love
this
it.
is one that's a little bit more well-known.
Okay.
So more well-known than ones that we normally cover, but I just had to.
Okay.
So here we go. Will you find me? I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody. Not the sort of phone call the police expected to get, but in the 1980s, it is exactly what happened to Minnesota police.
Wow, what an intro.
Between 1980 and 1982, several women in the Twin Cities area were found murdered or beaten to the brink of death. After each attack, the police would receive an anonymous call from a person dubbed the Weepy-Voiced Killer, who would call to tearfully confess to the crimes. Each time the caller called, he would confess remorse for the attacks and would fret that he'd, quote, never make it to heaven. He would claim that the voices in his head had made him do it. But when asked who he was, the caller would decline to reveal his identity before hanging up.
So he didn't really want to get caught. He just wanted attention.
It took 2 years for the killer to be caught and even more than a decade for all of his crimes to come to life.
Damn.
Have you ever heard
Did
of
you
him?
just say come to life?
Yeah, I did actually. come to light. I said the word and I was like, Have you heard of him before?
Nope.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is also, his name is the Weepy-Voiced Killer. He sounds like a dweeb. This is how we should name all serial killers.
100%.
You don't get to be like the East Area rapist,
Yeah,
the
no.
Night Stalker. No, you're the Weepy-Voiced Killer.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Little baby back bitch.
Kimberly Compton was an 18-year-old recent high school graduate from Pepin, Wisconsin. Like so many others from her small town with a population of less than 1,000.
They were peppy?
Well, she wanted to start a new chapter of her life in a new city. So on June 3rd,
So maybe not so peppy.
Not so peppy. Peppy to get out of there. So on June 3rd, 1981, she boarded a Greyhound bus and headed to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, to look for a job and start this new chapter.
Do you know why it's called the Twin Cities?
Because it's Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Oh.
And they're within like 20 minutes of each other.
Oh, there's literally two cities.
Yeah. Two cities.
Okay.
The Twin Cities.
I mean, it makes a lot more sense because that's why I didn't understand. I'm like, well, twinning for what? So now it makes sense now. Thank you for clarifying.
You're so welcome. So when she arrived, she rented out a locker at the bus depot, dropped off both of her bags, and went out to explore the city a bit and get a bite to eat. Stepping out of the bus depot across the street, she noticed Mikey's Diner. They had barbecue beef and fries as their special, so that is where she went. As Compton was eating, a man walked up to her and struck up a conversation. They got to talking, and Compton mentioned that she was new to the city and didn't really know her way around yet. This is when the man offered to give Compton a ride around the city, like a private tour, to show her all of the cool places in the city, the hidden gems that didn't show up on any tourist map.
See, this sounds like a cute little romantic story rom-com.
Like a meet cute, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also like, this is terrible.
We're doing it on our podcast, so you know it didn't end well.
Right. that too.
And in fact, he said that he knew of this really cool spot where Compton might get a spectacular view of the Mississippi. Because it's up there. She was very excited, so she readily accepted. But Compton never got the opportunity because her badly bloodied body was found by a group of teenagers on June 3rd, 1981, the same day she had moved to the city.
Jesus Christ.
The group of teens had been hanging out in a field in St. Paul, which is, again, just like 20 minutes from Minneapolis.
It's twin.
It's twin. When they came upon Compton's body, she had been viciously stabbed with an ice pick 61 times to her chest, stomach, and inner thighs and strangled with a shoelace.
Oh, my Lord.
Sergeant Joe Kirkoran, who arrived at the scene, said that he saw, quote, extreme rage in this one, and that this crime scene was the most devastating scene I'd seen in my career.
Is this the first one? Or is this the first one they know about?
We'll get to it.
Okay. I didn't know if a call was already made.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
48 hours after her body was found, police received a haunting call from an anonymous caller. He had a high-pitched voice, and in a remorseful tone, he confessed to having committed the crime. Please find me, he told 911 operators. I just stabbed someone with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing everybody. I don't know why I had to stab her. I'm so upset about it. Obviously, police initially thought this was a prank call. That was until the part where the caller had identified the murder weapon, a piece of information that had not been released to the public or the media. A few hours later, he called back, again, telling them to just listen, as he went on to explain his regret about killing Compton. He ended the call by promising, quote, I'll try not to kill anybody else. He also said that he would come turn himself in. He didn't.
You know what this sounds like? Very manipulative little narcissist.
Keep that thought. Police were able to trace where the call had come from and rushed to the phone booth where the call had been placed, but the killer wasn't there, and there were no witnesses to provide any sort of statement on who the guy had been. Police immediately started to look through their records of past calls. I mean, the guy just said he keeps killing. And because calls are recorded, they were able to compare the man's voice to another anonymous tip from a few months earlier.
Okay, so this wasn't the first one, just ended up being the one that got their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So that tip was from a man who reported attacking a young woman named Karen Potak and leaving her on the side of a road in St. Paul. The call had happened a few months earlier, on New Year's Day, 1981 at 3 a.m. The voice on the line begged the police to come help a girl who had been hurt, calling for an ambulance to be set to Pierce Butler Road, Melberg Manufacturing Company machine shop. Police, of course, rushed to the scene where they found... Shut up. Where they found 20-year-old college student Karen Potak lying naked in the snow, suffering from severe head and neck injuries.
But she was alive.
Potentially. I will get to it in my story. I will not leave you hanging. So she had come to St. Paul just the day before to party with her sisters. That night, she had left the party after midnight and was wandering around the city drunk. She didn't have a jacket, so she was trying to find
In Minnesota? It's freezing there.
on New Year's.
Oy!
Yeah. But it was probably one of those things. When we were in college, we didn't wear a jacket to go out.
No, but we also weren't in Minnesota.
That is true. So she didn't have a jacket, so she was trying to find the bar she'd been at earlier with her sisters, a familiar place that she knew would be warm. She quickly ducked down an alleyway as a shortcut to get to this bar a bit quicker. That is when a man driving through the alleyway saw her and slowed down. He noticed she was shivering. Shut up! So he rolled down his window and he offered her a ride. The car was warm and the man seemed nice, so Potak got into the car. She was found the next morning beaten so badly with a tire iron that her brain was exposed.
So no.
Potak was rushed immediately to the hospital where she miraculously lived.
You could have just started with that.
Her injuries were deemed so heinous, though, that police classified the attack as attempted murder.
Oh, 100%.
But her brain damage was so severe that she wasn't able to remember the attack or the attacker.
I was going to say, did
I
she...
feel like in the grand scheme of things is probably for the best that you can't remember the attack.
For sure, but it's also like with that kind of injury too, was she able to recover and live life normally again? Or
I don't know. I didn't look into it.
I mean,
but
if your freaking brain is exposed.
none of the reports said that she was like, none of the reports talked more about it afterwards.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything said she survived. So
I mean,
don't know
that
if she
in and
like,
of itself is great, but it's also sometimes you just think about when you are the victim of something that terrible. Well, yes, your goal is always to survive.
right.
But then,
It becomes your quality of life.
right, that
Yeah.
trauma that you have to deal with afterwards, or whatever injury that
Mhm.
may be lifelong,
Right.
you know?
I could look into it. I didn't look into I honestly don't think about looking
I just think
into
about
it.
the psychological aspect of it
Mhm.
that I'm just like, I wonder if people end up preferring one over the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So months from this, but only 3 days after the attack on Compton, this one was first, Potak's was first, and then Compton.
Okay.
On June 6th,
And
police.
so this was 3 months after the second one.
This was 3 days after the second.
Oh, 3 days.
Yeah. She was attacked on June 3rd. So on June 6th, the police received another call from the Weepy-Voiced Killer, where he said that the newspaper accounts of some of the murders were inaccurate, and he went on to correct them. Then on June 11th, 8 days after his attack on Compton, he called crying, saying, quote, "I'm sorry for what I did to Compton." 2 months
I
after
hate people like that.
2 months after Compton's death, police were called to a scene where a man named Alan Lopez was holding his family hostage. While negotiations were going on, Lopez told investigators that he was the one responsible for Kimberly Compton's murder. Lopez did have a long history of mental illness and assault, and after he took the lives of his family, then his own, no calls came into the police for 6 months. So the police really thought they were done with the Weepy-Voiced Killer.
That's really
I know,
sad.
it's very sad, because I just read one article where it was just
children.
Yeah. So I read one where it was just the family was held hostage, and then I read another one where it was after he killed his family, and I was like,
So they didn't save the hostages then. Okay.
Mm-mm. But on August 6, 1982, another body was found by a paperboy out on his paper route. He stumbled upon a body sprawled out on the banks of the Mississippi River. This body had over 100 circular stab wounds.
Jesus.
I know.
That's
Yeah. It's just rage.
Right, which is why those phone calls piss me off even more, because I'm like, you want to get away with what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but you want people to almost feel bad for you,
Mm-hmm.
as if you can't help it and you're actually the victim in this.
I get a little bit into that.
Manipulative asshole.
So the body was later identified as 40-year-old nurse Barbara Simmons. Detective Don Brown of the Minneapolis Police Department was called to the scene and observed that the wounds could have been made with either a Phillips screwdriver or an ice pick. He also concluded that this wasn't the first time the killer had killed, as a lot of effort had been put into hiding the crime, not something a first-timer likely would have done.
So did the other ones happen in Minneapolis, or those were in St. Paul, right?
Minneapolis, St. Paul area. One was picked up in Minneapolis, found in St. Paul.
Okay.
One was found in
I'm just
St.
like,
Paul.
I was just thinking like jurisdiction, if that like.
Oh, I don't know about jurisdiction. They didn't talk about any jurisdiction issues, so I
Okay.
think maybe they
That's
were like
good.
working together.
Yeah.
Then just 2 days later, police got their much anticipated call from the man with the weepy voice. Over the phone, he said, quote, "Please don't talk. Listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one over in St. Paul. I killed more people. I'll never make it to heaven." Police started to investigate the attack, and while doing so, they learned that the night before Simmons' body had been found, she had been at the Hexagon Bar in Minneapolis.
I bet it's shaped like a hexagon.
I would hope so. Or the drinks come in little hexagon cups.
Well, the octagon house is not the shape of an octagon.
Right, we went over that and we were very disappointed. Simmons was out that night and was dancing and drinking at the Hexagon Bar when she met a man. The man asked her for an extra cigarette, which she had, so she offered it to him. Right before she left with this man, she told her friend, other sources said the bartender, "I hope this guy's okay because I just need a ride home." So Barbara left with the man and got into his car. I mean, we have to remember, too, it's the 80s. Like, hitchhiking was so
I know.
common. Like, it's so scary.
And it's like the reason we have the mindset that we do is because of all this stuff that happened
Right.
before that we're like, okay, well, let's not do that.
So I read a lot of, like, articles on Yahoo, like, when I need something to read. And one of them was, like, stories from people who've hitchhiked. And so some people had, like, great stories. Some people had awful stories.
I'm sure.
So, of course, the man in the comments goes, "I've hitchhiked all these years and never happened to me, so I want to call BS on all these stories." And I said, "Oh, so just because something didn't happen to you doesn't mean it happened?" I, like, said something. I got so many freaking likes on my comment.
On Yahoo.
On Yahoo, of all places.
Wow, you're practically an influencer.
Thank you. With my, like, 8 likes. So back to the sad stuff. Okay. So police went to the Hexagon Bar and interviewed the friend bartender, who thankfully remembered the man and was able to provide police with a description. She said the man was a white man, bordering
Shocking.
bordering
A
on
white man? Typical.
bordering on overweight with a dark receding hairline. With that description in mind, the police started to look into records of who in the Twin Cities had violent records, just anyone who would potentially be the attacker. Using that and the help of the witness, they were able to narrow the suspect pool down to 8 men. They brought the photos of the men to the Hexagon Bar, and bar staff immediately recognized the man that Simmons had left with, Paul Michael Stefani.
3 names.
Hennepin County Attorney's Office began digging through Stefani's background and discovered that he had worked at the Melberg Manufacturing Company, where Potek had been attacked.
I was just going to say, there was some sort of manufacturer in this.
Yep. He soon became the investigation's main suspect. So who was Stefani?
That's a good question.
Paul Michael Stefani was born on September 8th, 1944 in Austin, Minnesota. He was the second of 10 children and grew up in a very religious Catholic household.
He was the second of 10.
Yeah.
So he was one of the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
It's surprising how much attention issues he has.
Well, out of 10 kids.
Yeah, but he was the oldest, so he was probably one of the ones in charge, so he had probably more people listening to him.
Maybe. Or he was pushed off and had to help the younger kids, as it seems in a lot of those families.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that too. I'm just like, the way he's like craving this attention from people.
Mm-hmm.
If he was like the 8th one of 10, I'm like, oh, of course you got ignored because
Right.
you were all the way at the bottom. I was thinking like, I don't know, older, maybe.
We'll get into more of it. So pretty much with this very religious family, it meant that as soon as he was old enough to speak, he was taken to church with the rest of the family every single Sunday. His mother also instilled the doctrines of the religion to include those of sin, confession, and absolution, which is a release from guilt.
Ah,
If our Catholic friend can chime in and make sure I got that right.
well, he's confessing to the wrong people because they're not priests. They can't.
But he's confessing.
But I think you have to have the like,
It's still his Catholic guilt.
oh, that is real for sure. Imagine having Jewish guilt and Catholic guilt.
Double whammy.
Seriously. Cannot tell a lie to save my life.
So his upbringing, as it always seems to go, wasn't great. His mother remarried when Stefani was only 3, and the new man became his stepfather. His stepfather was physically abusive with the children, often hitting them and sometimes even knocking them down the stairs if they misbehaved or got in his way.
Good Lord.
After graduating from high school in the mid-1960s, he moved to St. Paul and held down several different jobs. He met a woman named Beverly Leiter, and the two had a daughter, but they very quickly divorced, and he soon left his wife and child behind.
Loser.
He continued working in the area and worked as a shipping clerk and janitor, but was fired in 1977 from his janitor position at Melberg Manufacturing Company. Stefani was a devout Catholic, but deep down he was plagued by dark and disturbing voices and thoughts. Voices that were telling him, quote, "Paul, it's time to kill." It was then around this time that Stefani met a Syrian woman and began a very serious relationship. But their relationship inevitably ended when she had to leave the US and return back to her home country to an arranged marriage.
Oh, that sucks.
This wrecked him.
Yeah. There it is. That's the trigger, as they call it.
By the mid-1970s, Stefani was booked and eventually convicted of aggravated assault, putting him officially in the police's system. Mugshot, fingerprints, DNA, all of it.
Whole nine.
So back to him being a suspect. Without any hard evidence, the police couldn't arrest him, so they began tailing him instead. They even set up surveillance outside of his apartment in order to keep an eye on him and followed him when he left for Minneapolis. It was also around this time that media broadcast stations started to air recordings of the phone calls from the Weepy-Voiced Killer, with hopes that someone would recognize his unique voice.
You think it's natural?
His weepy voice?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of emotion mixed into it. It's like a lot of crying and a lot of it's an emotional thing that he's calling about.
Yeah.
But they're hoping that he does have a unique voice.
Okay.
That they're hoping that under the emotion and they're crying, someone will recognize it.
Okay, so he's
Because
not
if I hear you crying, I'm gonna know it's you.
Right, but like he's not like calling them and talking like this.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he's
okay.
calling and he's like crying.
Oh,
And it's
okay,
weepy
okay,
voiced
okay.
because he's crying. So he's trying to get through what happened as he's crying, telling him about it.
Got it. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yes. That's why when you're like, no, narcissist, I was like, not quite.
Well, there's definitely still some narcissism in there.
Probably.
It might just be more underlying.
Underlying, yeah. Police received over 150 calls from the public, but the recordings were so short and distorted with emotion that they failed to provide the identity of the murderer. Just days later, on August 21st, 1982, somehow police briefly lost track of Stefani, and during those few hours, police received another phone call. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Well, okay, yeah.
100% I can. It happens all the time in TV, so
Comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
This time from a man who had called 911 after he had witnessed a man stabbing a woman with a screwdriver.
Jesus.
The man told 911 that he had tried to intercede but was threatened by the man doing the stabbing and that the man was able to get away and flee. That woman was 21-year-old, some sources say 19, Denise Williams, a sex worker. Williams thankfully survived her ordeal, and this is what she said happened. There you go. I started with the fact that she
Thank you.
She said that while working in Minneapolis, she was approached by a man in a car. She walked up to him, and the two arranged a price for her services, $100 to have some fun. He told her that he
You're
only
worth
had
more than that, baby girl.
That's what I knew. I was like, Mackenzie's gonna say that. He told her that he only had 40 on him at the time, but they could get the other 60 when he drove her back to the city after their fun. He leaned over, opened the door for her, and she hopped right in. But on the way back, she noticed something was wrong when Stefani began driving through a dark suburban area rather than returning her back to the city. Williams knew that something was wrong, so she started looking around to see if she could find anything that she could use as a weapon if she needed to. She spotted a glass soda bottle rolling around on the floor, so she discreetly picked it up. This is when Stefani pulled onto a dead-end road, turned to her, and immediately began stabbing her with a screwdriver. She was stabbed 15 times.
Jesus.
She fought back by using that bottle and smashing it over Stefani's head.
Hell yeah.
This is what she needed to get out of the car and start screaming. And there's in a lot of the articles, this car, the picture of the aftermath of this car is the top picture in every article. And I'm like, so with all the blood and everything, I'm like, it's so bad.
Yeah, there was a lot less censorship back then.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the articles. I'm like, oh my God.
Like when I went to the Museum of Death and they had some newspaper clippings and they just had full on dead bodies.
Yeah.
Right in the newspaper.
Yes.
I was like, well, damn.
Yeah, that doesn't really happen anymore.
They kept no secrets.
Her screams were able to get the attention of a man, Douglas Penning, who lived nearby in that suburban area. Upon him seeing Stefani stab Williams, the man tackled him. The two began wrestling, but Stefani was able to slip away and flee. The man immediately called for an ambulance for Williams. She had received 15 stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, and head.
Jesus.
She also had a punctured lung and liver, but she survived. Authorities arrived and Williams was able to report her attack. She was shown a mugshot of Stefani and was able to confirm that he was the man who had attacked her. Soon after Williams reported her attack, Stefani called for medical help. His call went like this, quote, "I need an ambulance. I'm all cut up. I got beat up and I'm bleeding." And this call followed many other calls that police were very familiar with. The caller, requesting medical assistance, had a weepy voice. He was picked up and interviewed, obviously because he had attacked a girl. Through the questioning, he tried to claim that he was the victim of a robbery. That's why he was bleeding. Not because a girl who he had been stabbing fought back.
Sure.
But police knew this was the man who had attacked Williams. So police decided to try something else and decided to show him photos of the victims. Detective Brown said that Stefani, quote, got up from his seat and said, "You're not going to pin those on me." And his voice immediately changed. He went to a high pitch. Right away, it struck me as the voice I had heard on the recordings. He was immediately charged with the assault of Denise Williams and the murder of Barbara Simmons. But he pled not guilty to the assault and the murder. But it was also widely believed that he attacked Compton and Potak due to the whiny phone calls, but unfortunately there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with those. So at his trial in 1983, Stefani's ex-wife, sister, and a woman who had lived with him at the time all testified.
Against him?
Mm-hmm.
Damn. Your own sister.
Uh-huh. Saying that they believed he was the caller.
Woo.
They heard the recordings of his 911 calls and knew without a doubt that the voice of the recordings belonged to Stefani. Because again, if it's someone who you know, like if you're crying, I'm going to know your voice. If Joe's crying, I'm going to know his voice. But other people who like have
We would like to say we knew your voice, but you don't cry.
But other people who might not know you very well aren't going to be able to pick you out of something if you're crying.
For sure.
It was also revealed that Stefani's ex-wife was one of the concerned citizens who had called the police when news media released his 911 calls.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. In the end, after a 6-week trial, he was sentenced to 40 years for the murder of Simmons.
That's it?
That's it.
What happened to life?
I don't know.
What about the assault?
He was also charged with attempted murder for his attack on Williams.
And got?
He would go on and try to plead not guilty to this charge. The case went to trial where he was found guilty and received an additional 18 years on top of the 40 he was already sentenced with.
So it's not consecutive?
I think consecutive.
Or concurrent?
So it is going to be consecutive. So
Okay.
40 plus 18.
Okay.
So 58 years.
Okay, that's better.
While he was in prison, Caroline Lowe, a local reporter for WCCO TV, interviewed Stefani. She had been covering the killing spree pretty much from the beginning. So this was like her first full circle moment to interview the man.
Okay.
She was the one who released the 911 recordings on the news. So
Okay.
she was the reason why they had gotten out there. So that's good. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't a bad leak. It was like a good leak.
Yeah.
It wasn't a leak. They were doing it to help.
Yes.
Yes.
It was purposeful.
Yes. Lowe said that she was careful not to wear red during the interview because, and this is so wild, all of Stefani's victims were wearing red at the time of his attacks.
Interesting.
Isn't that wild?
And good for her for picking up on that.
Isn't that scary?
That's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Lowe said that Stefani looked like your everyday person. She said, quote, serial killers and rapists can look so ordinary. You think they're going to look like the bad guys from CSI, but you never know what you're going to face.
Even those bad guys don't look like bad guys.
Right. More than a month after his trial, Stefani was diagnosed with melanoma and was told that he only had a few months to live. After receiving this news, Stefani said that he would like to confess to his crimes. But he had one condition. He would confess to all of his crimes if he could get a photo of his mother's gravesite. He received his photo, so on October 19th, 1997, he confessed to all of his crimes, 15 years later. He also confirmed the attacks he was always suspected of committing, one of those being Karen Potak. He continued to confess to 2 more unsolved murders, including that of Kimberly Compton. He told the Star Tribune, quote, since I've been locked down the last 15 years, I'm wondering how all this could happen. And all I can say is I'm sick and I'm sorry, if sorry means anything after 15 years.
No, it doesn't.
He also, at this point, tried to see if he could get the victims' families' addresses so he could send them flowers and apologize.
Ew!
I know.
Oh my God. Like, you're doing this because you want the forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You are not doing this because you think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Like,
it's the forgiveness.
You want this is purely selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
The second unsolved murder he confessed to was that of Kathleen Greening, who had been found dead in a bathtub in her Roseville residence on July 21st, 1982. This case hadn't been connected to the Weepy-Voiced Killer because Stefani had not called the police after committing this crime. He couldn't remember much of the murder other than the fact that he had drowned her in a bathtub.
So he didn't even stab her.
Nope.
So what do we know? Connection?
A little. So, sure enough, police looked back at their unsolved cases and confirmed that there was an unsolved case of a woman who drowned in a bathtub. It had, for the most part, at the time been classified as a suicide.
Mm.
Her story goes that on July 21st, 1982, Kathleen Greening from St. Paul was planning on taking a little vacation with her best friend Carol Kellogg to Mackinac Island. That's why I call her Carol throughout the rest of this, not Kellogg. So that morning, Carol drove to Greening's house so the two could have some breakfast before they left for the airport. She knocked on the door and waited, but Greening didn't answer. Carol tried the doorknob and noticed it was unlocked, so she let herself in. She called out for Greening, but still received no answer. That is when Carol, worried, started to look through Greening's house. Carol was stopped in her tracks, though, when she noticed the bathroom door partially open with the light on. She fully pushed the door open and was faced with the horrible sight of her best friend dead in the bathtub.
Mm.
Some believe that this confession of Kathleen Greening was just a sadistic form of clout that Stefani was trying to gain, but he was able to provide details that only the killer would know, such as details about what Greening's apartment looked like during the crime. His name was even saved in the victim's phone book. So people thought he was just trying to claim another murder, but he was like...
I just want to know why this one was so different.
I don't know.
Yeah.
He said that during the killing of Greening, he felt like he was playing a game. He would be smiling. Just then, a few seconds later, he would be asking himself, quote, what are you doing? She's dying. Apparently, even he couldn't understand why he would pick up someone at a bar, then be stabbing them only 15 minutes later.
I mean, they're obviously not going to therapy, so of course they're not going to understand why they decide to kill people. Most of the time someone has told them, this is probably why. Like,
In the end, and in order of death, he confessed to beating Kieran Potak, 20, in 1980, to fatally stabbing Kimberly Compton, 18, in 1981, to drowning Kathleen Greening, 33, in 1982, to fatally stabbing Barbara Simmons, 40, in 1982, and to repeatedly stabbing Denise Williams, 21, in 1982. Both Potak and Williams survived. And even after all these years, Stefani was never able to provide the reason behind why he killed, though many have speculated. All Stefani was able to say was that his urge to kill was from a voice in his head that said, Paul, it's time to kill. He also divulged that after one of the murders, he went to a Catholic church and sat in the back of the pew and cried.
there's definitely a Criminal Minds episode like this, but he has schizophrenia, so.
And like I've said over the years, many have speculated why Stefani did what he did, and especially why he would call the police afterwards. So sometimes killers will call the cops to brag about what they've done. They want the notoriety, they want the attention, they want the publicity. They want that sensation that they're being looked for, and they're challenging the police to find them, but not Stefani.
Yeah.
It seemed his calls were coming from a place of actual true guilt, the Catholic guilt from his upbringing. So he wanted the police to know what he did and that he was sorry, and he wanted to be stopped, but he didn't want to be caught. So he kept saying, I want you to stop me, but he wouldn't tell them where he was or who he was.
So then he doesn't actually.
And when he's like,
stopped.
I'll turn myself in, but he doesn't. So people were saying, like, because there was one quote, I couldn't find it again, but that he would rather die than go to jail.
Right.
So he wanted to stop, but he didn't want to be caught and end up in jail because of it. So Detective Don Brown of the Minneapolis Police Department has his rationale for Stefani's actions. He says it all stemmed from his lost relationship with a Syrian woman. So, quote,
Yeah, I definitely think that was a trigger for sure.
This upset Stefani very much, said Detective Brown. When Stefani was attacking his victims, I believe he was attacking his former girlfriend because he felt so betrayed by what she did to him.
Yeah. Pitiful reason, but.
It is. In the end, Stefani said, quote, killing seemed to me, the thing you were supposed to do that was part of life. Driving a car was part of life. Eating food was part of life. To me, it seemed like killing was part of life until I did it. Paul Michael Stefani ended up dying on June 12, 1998 in Oak Park Heights Prison, Minnesota at the age of 53 due to complications from skin cancer.
Good dog.
And then this last part I have is just for you. So characters who have been inspired by Stefani have appeared in many Criminal Minds episodes.
Ooh.
So I don't have any information about the episodes, but I have Season 8, The Gathering.
Season 8, The Gathering. Ooh, okay, Season 8. That was a good one. That's one of my favorites.
I can find the episodes and tell you about them. Like this little
No, but I
page
want
that
to try to guess.
Okay.
I need to know the episode number.
It's literally criminalminds.fandom.com.
Yeah.
Oh, 17th episode in Season 8. So Season 8, Episode 17. Do you want me to tell you the killer's name?
Yeah.
Mark Jackson. It says, both were serial killers who were abused by stepfathers, targeted women, stabbed them to death, were active in St. Paul, Minnesota, deviated once from their MO by asphyxiating a victim. Jackson manually strangled one while Stefani drowned in a bathtub, and they were stopped from killing a final victim when a man confronted them, though Jackson was killed by Peter Harper. Oh, this guy was Mark Jackson. The way Jackson saved a victim from his drunken boyfriend could be a slight nod to how Stefani.
Oh, I remember that one.
Okay. And then we have Season 10, the episode called Fate.
Ooh.
So Fate was...
Season 10, that was an intense one.
9. So Season 10, Episode 9.
Okay. The first one you were talking about, I remember because it starts off and he knows her name, and that the boyfriend later on is like, yeah, like I thought he knew her because he knows her name. And it's because he was stalking them.
Okay, so the unsub is Ellen Connell. Both were killers who were married and had a daughter, mental health problems, primarily targeted at gender.
Oh, was she the one who, like, she had gotten a car crash and she went fucking nuts and, like, couldn't help herself from stabbing people?
Well, Connell accidentally killed a victim in a car crash.
Yes! Right! Oh my God, that one is, like, crazy. She, like, comes back, she's, like, covered in blood. She has this thing where she, like, rips out her hair so she has to wear a wig. She ends up killing a lady she works with. That's how she get caught.
And then we have Season 11, 19th episode. So Season 11, Episode 19. So this one, it says Stefani was possibly referenced by a marker denoting to an infamous serial killer seen on Reed's map of infamous serial killers by location. Could be seen pointing to Minneapolis's approximate location, presumably as a reference to Stefani.
Oh yeah, there's times where they just talk about them.
And that one was called Tribute. But yeah, so
There's definitely been a few, though, where, like, people will emulate the famous ones, so that's not surprising.
Yeah, so when I saw that there was a whole like Criminal Minds fandom for Stefani, I was like, oh, Mackenzie's gonna get a kick out of this. But yeah, so that is Paul Michael Stefani, the Weepy-Voiced Killer. I'm actually shocked you hadn't heard about him before, but I kind of had a feeling you wouldn't. So that's why I was like, well, I'm going to cover this because
I really don't know a lot of them.
perfect nickname, because the nicknames that make fun of the killer are the best.
Not even, I don't want a location. I don't care about the Green River.
Right. And that, like, things like that, it sounds cool. And like the Night Stalker sounds cool. And like BTK named himself because he liked it. Don't give them those. Give him the Weepy-Voiced Killer. Give him the Small Dick Killer. Like, give him things like that.
The bald man.
Right. The bald man.
Receding hairline.
Things like that.
Hairy back.
That will make them embarrassed to be
Yes.
talked about in the newspaper.
Well, that's why they say to not give them a name at all,
right.
because it sensationalizes them.
Exactly.
I'm just really proud of myself that I could guess those two.
I actually am too.
I'm hoping that the first one I said is the right one. I know the second one was. I was right.
It was. You said car crash, and there, right in the description was car crash.
But yeah,
This is wild.
this is crazy. Yeah, well, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's dead. And I hope it was painful
I hope so too. I feel like it was because it was cancer.
and it complicated.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound
Complications
good.
from cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, no one's weeping over you. That's for sure.
That is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What story you got for us today, Mackenzie?
I got one that is out of this world.
Aliens?
Aliens. So Jerome Clark wrote the book, The UFO Encyclopedia, in 1998. He includes a story that is considered one of the top 10 most influential UFO encounters in history.
Oh.
The incident occurred in 1979 near the North Dakota and Minnesota border on a secluded road in Marshall County. It had been a routine night on patrol, and Marshall County Deputy Val Johnson, 35 at the time, had reported into the sheriff's office regularly throughout a shift. Johnson recalled, quote, I was on my way home from Stephen, Minnesota, and it was about 1:15 or 1:30 when I left there in the morning.
Okay.
I took County Road 5 west out of Stephen, and when I got to its junction with 220, I looked south and I saw a bright light in the distance about 2.5 miles away. It was very bright and white and about 4 feet off the ground. I proceeded in that direction because I was heading home anyway. I proceeded in that direction to investigate more fully. I didn't know what it was. I proceeded south.
Oh my God.
He was a cop. He was retelling it like a cop.
Exactly. Yep.
I proceeded south on 220 a little more than a mile or so, and all of a sudden, the light intercepted my vehicle. 1 minute, it was 1.5 miles distant, and the next minute, it was right on me. It struck my vehicle. Everything got extremely painfully bright. My eyes hurt. There was no object I could see at all. I heard the sound of breaking glass, and that's the last I remember.
Ew.
Johnson woke up about 40 minutes later at 2:20 a.m., leaning on his steering wheel. The engine wasn't running, and Johnson called in a, quote, 1088, officer needs assistance. When the dispatcher asked him what was wrong, he said, I don't know, something just hit my car.
Oh.
When the officer from Stephen got to the scene, he called for an ambulance. Johnson later told the press, quote, I was bouncing up and down and shivering. My eyes hurt extremely badly. We'll forgive his grammar. The
He just had a traumatic experience, Mackenzie.
Not when he's retelling the story.
Oh, well, it was traumatic to think about again.
The ambulance took me to Warren Hospital and x-rayed me to see if there was damage. I said my eyes hurt real bad. The doctor put salve, like, you know, like how you can have a bomb, but it's not like a pow bomb. It's like a lip balm.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Well, now that you described it, I'm sure people know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Anyway, he gets that stuff on his eyes.
Okay.
And bandages. And then he goes home. Actually, no, he didn't go home. He went and recorded a statement at the sheriff's office at 5 a.m. He works the night shift, so it wasn't weird that he was there.
Right.
That early, late, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Around this time, Sheriff Dennis Brecky? Sure. Told Johnson that he was going to call the UFO Center. So his boss decided this.
Oh, that's fun.
Both agreed that it was some kind of an unidentified object, but Johnson wasn't ready to say definitively that it was extraterrestrial.
Okay.
Johnson was then taken home to get some sleep. What did I say, Brecky? What did I say, Sheriff Dennis?
I don't think you said brekkie because that's too much like breakfast. Like, let's go get brekkie.
Did I just say Breck?
I don't think you said that either.
It's Brekke. So not break.
We can say breck
Dennis Breck.
because brekkie makes me think of breakfast.
I definitely said something that was 2 syllables, but I
think
don't
you did
remember
too.
what it was. That's okay. They're used to it by now. Breck picked up Johnson the next day to take him to the ophthalmologist. The doctor took off the bandages and told Johnson he had irritation in the inner eye, what was described as having minor welder burns, which could be caused by seeing a very bright light in the dark.
Interesting.
Val Johnson's incident was immediately investigated by many interested parties. Chief investigator for the Center of UFO Studies, Al Hendry, came in the following week from Evanston, Illinois. He told the media, quote, "It is a most incredible case, and there are some most unusual clues. There are 5 damaged parts to the patrol car. The windshield was cracked, there was a broken headlamp, a small dent in the hood, and 2 bent antennas. The top 3.5 inches of one antenna next to the one, it was like on top of the car next to the light. It was bent at a 45 degrees angle. Then there's another antenna that's like in the middle of the trunk. It was also at the top, but it was bent 90 degrees.
Okay.
So both were bent at the same place, but one was more bent than the other.
Right. What way were they bent? Were they bent towards the car or were they bent more like away from the car?
That is a good question. They didn't say.
Because I feel like that could help us determine what direction the thing came from.
That is a very good question. They did not say. They just said it was, they just talked about the angle it was bent at. Although his car didn't just stop where it was. So
it kept moving a little bit.
Yeah. So it might not have been, even if, depending on, like, it might not have made a difference if they knew which way because of how the car moved afterwards.
Yeah, but I was wondering, like, if it, like, was bent really far in the back and not as far in the front, then the object kind of went, like that off of it. But if it was bent less in the front and more in the back, it could have been, you know, like,
well, it was only the one in the
directions.
middle on the top and the one in the trunk in the back.
Yeah.
It's only those 2.
Yeah.
But there's more than those 2.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might have said bent backwards, but I didn't pick up on it because I
Right.
obviously didn't think about that until you just said it. So I don't know. But also, side note, all this damage, it only cost them $270 to fix it.
Naturally.
You know what cost me $250 on my car?
Brakes.
That was to get them probably installed. That wasn't even the cost of the brakes themselves. Examination of the site showed that the patrol car traveled 854 feet from the point of impact, but before there were skid marks for about 100 feet. So he traveled almost 850 feet, and then there was also the additional 100 or so feet of skid mark.
Right. Wild.
Right? Johnson recalled, quote, "It was determined afterwards that at the point of the interception, my headlight debris was lying on the highway. From that point, estimating my speed at 60 miles per hour, I coasted an absolutely straight line for 850 feet. I do not recall this." That's what's crazy.
And also the fact that, like, if there are skid marks, that means the brakes were applied. So he had to have used the brakes, but then doesn't remember any of it.
At some point, Johnson engaged the brakes, which left the skid marks on the road. However, he has no recollection of doing this.
Right.
He stopped with his car at a right angle into the lanes of oncoming traffic.
Ooh.
So he wasn't in a ditch,
Mm-hmm.
but he was, like, his car had turned.
Right.
Fishtailed a little bit. Thankfully, 2 o'clock in the morning, there was no
Not many
cars
people out.
in that 40 minutes he was knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
Also noted is that the fact that both Johnson's wristwatch and the electric clock in the car had both stopped for 14 minutes.
Ew.
Isn't that weird? Like 14 minutes.
At the same
Same
14
time.
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hendry said he contacted 5 Federal Aviation Administration organizations in the area, and all said they had no knowledge of aircraft activity in that area at the time of the incident. He told reporters that whatever hit the car, quote, "must have been traveling extremely fast to bend the antennas without moving the springs."
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was like a very quick, like, whoosh
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sheriff Breck wasn't sure what could have caused the accident. He said, quote, "We're not trying to scare people. We don't know what this is. Maybe it's something that can be explained. But at this point, we don't have an answer to it. Even the gentleman we called from Chicago doesn't have an answer to it." I believe he's referring to Hendry because Evanston is about a half hour from Chicago.
Okay.
So I'm assuming.
Right.
Sheriff Breck gave Johnson a few days off to recuperate from the bump on his head and what the doctors called welder burns on his eyes. Johnson was back in the office to deal with a slew of reporters who were calling and coming in for interviews. Johnson told reporters he wasn't worried about returning to patrol. He said, quote, "Lightning doesn't strike twice in the same spot. I hope."
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Even if Johnson wasn't frazzled by what happened, the incident did change his life. He did interviews with Good Morning America and numerous telephone talk shows, I don't know what that means, all over the country. He told the media, quote, I have a certain degree of notoriety I've never had before. Hopefully it will change and settle down and return to normal. It's been a strain on our family.
Oh.
His wife, Roseanne, wholeheartedly agreed, saying, quote, it's completely disrupted our entire family organization. There are so many calls and I'm so busy taking care of my family and getting everyone fed. We have a baby and that takes time. We have one to get off to school and the phone keeps ringing. I believe at the time he had a 1, 4, and 6-year-old.
Wow.
I know they were young.
Yeah.
Eventually, the family did move to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The Center for UFO Studies sent someone with a magnetometer to check for a magnet change in the middle of the car. That just sounds
Ooh.
like a made-up device.
It does.
They
That
also
sounds cool.
Yeah. They also wanted to get the windshield sent to Evanston for tests to see whether it was cracked by intense heat. Infrared pictures were taken of the ground at the site of the incident to find out whether any plants had been affected by intense light. The photographs of the vegetation in the area did indicate that there had been an intensely bright light in that area. Experts said it appeared that the chlorophyll in the vegetation was stimulated as if by super bright light.
Interesting.
So a metallurgical...
Come again?
I don't know. It's a metallurgical engineer.
Okay.
It's a broad field that deals with all sorts of metal-related areas.
That's what I gathered, yes.
Metallurgy is a domain of materials science and engineering that studies the physical and chemical behavior of metallic elements, their inner metallic compounds, and their mixtures, which are known as alloys.
Okay.
So they study metal.
Yeah.
According to Google.
Yep.
Anyway, this guy, he's an engineer for that.
Okay.
He's from Honeywell Inc. in Minneapolis. Roland D. Wardell. Okay. He examined the car's antennas and fragments of glass from the squad car headlight and the top flasher light. In his report, he said his inspection points to a highly charged electrical thing with enough mass and momentum to break the left headlight, crack the windshield, bend the two antennas, disrupt the car's electrical system, and stop both the car clock and Johnson's wristwatch for 14 minutes.
Wow.
Thank you. Wardell said, quote, I found no earthly explanation that could cause all those things. You could pick out all sorts of earthly explanations to cause single portions of it, but to cause all those things, that makes it very interesting.
Yeah.
According to the report, rocks might have broken the lights in the windshield of the car, but Wardell was unsure what caused the antennas to bend. Tests showed that they were not hit by solid objects or bent by heat. Wardell said, quote, super strong electrical fields can produce these effects, but also noted that they could be caused by a blast of air or a hand. So that's why I was thinking like, whoosh, something really fast.
Yeah.
Wardell discounted lightning as the possible source of an electrical blast because of the absence of heat. I hate how lightning is spelled.
Lightning.
Where the fuck is the E? Why is in lightning all of a sudden we don't have to put the E in there? But for everything else is when it's an N. Really, I don't like it. Wardell explained, quote, we live in an age that tells us there likely are civilizations more advanced than us. We, as a civilization, are accomplishing extensive space travel. We know how to utilize intense electrical fields for accelerating particles or producing forces, which I think is a great argument. Because it's like, look how advanced we are at this point, and you think that there can't be someone more advanced than us?
Right.
Ridiculous. In concluding his report, Wardell said any statement as to what damaged the car would be speculation, but he wasn't ruling out the possibility of some kind of vehicle from outer space. Deputy Johnson was also deemed as a credible witness. He was married with 3 young children and living in a house on a quiet street in Oslo. Before joining the sheriff's department 2.5 years ago, he worked as a machinist around Wisconsin and Minnesota, including a stint at 3M in St. Paul in early 1970. I don't know what that is, but it seemed like it was important to mention because it was in the newspaper. At the time, he was responsible for patrolling 2 towns and 9 townships every night. Johnson later said, quote, I was pretty down in the dumps the first couple of days afterwards. I thought I was in mental difficulty.
Oh.
That's what I'm going to start saying right now. I am in mental difficulty.
Please respect me at this time.
Yeah. It's pretty hard for me to justify since I work with facts and logic, but what happened isn't logical and it's a bit frightening. Reverend Roger Brockmeyer of Zion Lutheran Church in Oslo told reporters that people in town were mostly taking the news calmly. He said they are very curious. Everyone took Val's word for it. They accept his credibility. A farmer at a local coffee shop said, quote, I believe him. Why would he lie? I don't think anybody was scared. I think people are more scared of a blizzard. Okay. Being believed helps relieve some of the tensions of the experience. Johnson said, quote, I know it happened to me and the majority of the people in this area are understanding and supportive. Johnson wasn't the only one who had experiences around the time of his accident. Johnson told the Minneapolis Star, quote, I've had about 10 stories told to me in the last week from reputable people in this area who say, now that your story is public, I can tell you what happened to me.
Oh.
Everett Doolittle, real name, chief deputy in the Marshall County Sheriff's Office in Warren said, quote, we're getting people steadily coming, respectable people, saying they've seen things. John Linnell, assistant administrator of the Warren Hospital, said that 2 weeks before the Johnson incident, he and his wife had a strange experience while driving home from Northwood, North Dakota. Linnell said, quote, I saw bright lights over a field to my left. The light stayed in the same spot above the trees. I told my wife to look, and 15 seconds later, the thing came at us.
Oh.
I didn't know what it was, but it scared me. He goes on to say, it came and hovered on top of us so we couldn't see the outline of it. When I almost stopped the car, it took a 180-degree turn and took off north.
Gross.
Now, north is not necessarily mean up.
Yeah.
So, just saying.
Yeah.
Linnell believed there were too many lights to be a plane and there hadn't been any sound. He tried to see what the object was, but when he tried to look, the bright light would hurt his eyes. Linnell said that he didn't report the incident, but after hearing reports of Johnson's experience, he was struck by the similarities. Russ Johnson, no relation, of Vermillion, South Dakota, also had a similar experience to Linnell and Val Johnson. Again, no relation. He recalled, quote, it was 2 a.m. on August 29th, and I was coming into Vermillion. So 2 days after Val's
Oh,
thing.
okay.
Yeah. I was going over a bridge coming up a hill, and it looked like a bright light, like a motorcycle was coming at me. I thought it was a car with one light. A second later, I was sitting inside of a light bulb. I hit the brakes and
I was sitting inside of a light bulb? Like, meaning it was really, really bright?
That's what I'm assuming.
Oh, okay.
I hit the brakes and was sitting on the highway. I looked to the west, and all I could see was the light with a tail behind it for 2 seconds, and then it shut off. The whole thing took about 10 seconds. It was here and gone. I have no idea what it was. I was shaken up so badly that when I went to the police station to fill out reports, I couldn't remember how to spell words.
Oh.
Every day.
For some people, it doesn't take trauma.
Just takes living. Deputy Doolittle. What a name. Deputy Doolittle said he got a rash of UFO reports about 2 years ago when he was working nights. He said that a family in Argyle saw a strange light moving about the trees, and a family near Viking watched out their picture window as a, quote, light came from out of the sky and hovered and then went back up into the sky.
Do you think the Minnesota Vikings are from Viking, Minnesota?
That's what I thought.
Oh, Joe? Are the Minnesota Vikings from Viking, Minnesota? Oh, missed opportunity if it's not. There's no relation.
Which came first, Viking, Minnesota, or the Vikings?
Right. Yeah, was Viking, Minnesota named after the Vikings?
Who knows? Elaine Swenson, who lives near Viking, said she still didn't know what she saw on the road 2 years prior to the Johnson incident. She told reporters, quote, it was after dark and a friend and I were on the way back from Grand Forks between Warren and Alvarado. We had our lights on and we saw taillights in front of us and we assumed it was a car. We followed them quite a way. They started to slow down and all of a sudden stopped. We had to slam on the brakes. We came right behind them. We stopped and then there was nothing there. It just disappeared into thin air. Just disappeared. We couldn't think of any explanation. So I'm assuming, driving behind the car, it stops, she slams on the brakes, it's gone.
The car.
I think so.
Huh.
I'm inferring.
Right.
There's also apparently a locally famous story from 1975 where 2 high school girls were driving on Highway 1 near Goodrich, and the girls' car stalled and they saw something very strange. That something then took off and the car started again.
What's that whole, like, metal magnetic thingy?
Yeah. A man who lives about 2 miles from Oslo told Val Johnson that, quote, a large light hovered over the farm bright enough to turn off his mercury vapor yard light. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming something for farms.
Yeah.
Johnson believed that the telling of these stories is important for the people involved. He said, quote, I think it's healthy that information should come out and substantiate the mental ability of people who see these things. When asked about what he thought about the UFO theory for his own experience, he said, quote, I have nothing to base an alien explanation on. It's an unidentified object, and who knows what level of technology our government or another government might have. We're close to Grand Forks Air Base. Perhaps they're testing something there. But Johnson says that if it was a UFO, he did not think he was being attacked by it. He said, quote, I feel I was neutralized. They didn't mean any harm. I could have rolled in a ditch, but I went straight for 800 feet.
Right.
If it was an alien, I stumbled across something I probably wasn't supposed to see. That's as good as an explanation as I've been able to come up with.
He has a really good outlook on it.
Absolutely. Very healthy.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned before, the Johnsons eventually moved to nearby Eclair, where Johnson was offered a position as chief of police in the nearby town of Oslo, which I'm pretty sure is also where he lived. I guess it's all relatively close to each other.
It has to be.
Locals, he said, never questioned his ability to enforce the law. John Eager of NPR News, not
NPR.
NPR, M like monkey.
NPR.
NPR.
Maybe Montana.
Minnesota.
That's what I meant.
Public radio.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was able to locate Val Johnson for a quick phone interview in 2015. Johnson was now 71, retired, and still living in Eclair with his wife, Roseanne.
Oh.
He told Eager that for years, people sometimes showed up on his front porch with theories about his experience in Marshall County. He said, quote, we'd sit in the backyard with lemonade and talk.
Oh.
They'd tell me what they thought happened to me, and I'd nod at appropriate times. Eventually, they go away.
Oh.
He's such a wholesome man.
He really is.
Johnson said that people hadn't stopped by in years, and no one called about the UFO incident, even when his name came up on television. To this day, Johnson won't speculate on what happened to him in 1979. He doesn't think the light he saw was an extraterrestrial, but he also won't rule out the possibility. For years, he said it just hadn't crossed his mind. I saw a ball of light, he said. I drove toward it, and suddenly it was in the car with me. It's unexplainable and will remain so. I'm happy with my mental stability.
He does sound just so, like...
Matter of fact.
Yes.
Yeah. Marshall County Historical Society in Warren preserves documentation of the incident as well as its most dramatic evidence, Johnson's squad car. The damaged windshield, hood, lights, and antennas remain as they appeared in 1979.
Oh, that's cool.
The museum's president, Mike Johnson, again, no relation, told Grand Forks Herald in 2013 that more visitors come to his institution to see the damaged vehicle, known as the UFO car, than any other artifact. Apparently, it was mentioned on my show. I haven't seen it yet, though. My museum show.
Oh, cool.
In 2019, Warren residents celebrated the 40th anniversary of the deputy's encounter with a public event featuring live music, an alien costume contest, and a dramatic reenactment of Johnson's radio call.
I love when towns just fully embrace their history for fun things, not bad history.
Correct.
But like history like this, where they're like, he had a big thing with an alien, let's have an alien festival.
I just think it's funny that one, he's still alive, and two, he doesn't live there anymore. They're like having
But
this...
it happened there.
Yes. But they're like, it's I guess in my mind, when I first read it, I was like, kind of sounds like they're having a celebration on behalf of someone else who doesn't want the celebration.
Right.
like,
Like, let us celebrate you.
Yes.
I don't want it, but we want it.
we're-
We want
yes,
it.
this is for us, not for you.
Yeah, exactly.
In conclusion, Jerome Clark told John Eager in 2015 that people who are involved with UFO encounters tend to fall into 3 categories of coping mechanisms.
Oh?
He said some become obsessed with what happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
some live in denial about what happened to them, and others somehow find peace by refusing to allow an encounter to change their lives.
I would either be... Okay, sorry.
If something like this happened to you, which of these 3 categories do you think you'd fall into? I wanted to ask my question.
It could have been a perfect segue.
But I wanted to ask my question.
Anywho, I think I would not let it change my life much, but you best believe I'd be talking about it a lot.
I think I would end up becoming obsessed. I would be in denial to other people
Mm-hmm.
because I would be afraid I'd be made fun of, but there's no way I wouldn't. I'd become obsessed with too many things. I get fixated on something until I can find the answer.
This would be your true fixation.
So like, I'm screwed if something like this ever happens to me. Yeah, no, I would become obsessed.
yeah.
I would have to find peace.
You know, the people on this podcast would hear us talk about it like every day.
Yeah.
Or day.
But I feel like I'd become the kind of obsessed of like, not just necessarily talking about it all the time, but like obsessed with finding the answer
Right.
of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be on all the vlogs, all the Reddit posts.
Oh, it'd be bad. There's some things that I have to say no to because I'm like, if I start it, I can't stop.
Right.
And it's bad.
Well, good for him for finding peace.
Yeah, I thought it was like an interesting story because
Yeah.
he was like, the big thing with this is that there was evidence.
And that he's such a well-respected
Mhm.
and like very mentally stable dude.
Yes. And this evidence they looked into and the answers that they found from it, yes, it might be this, it might be that, but it was like anything that we could definitively say, lightning, weather balloon, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
all not it.
Right.
So there's a lot that's still unexplained.
And it's still a UFO because it was an unidentified flying object. Not necessarily an alien, but definitely something that was flying and unidentified.
Correct. And it sounds like, too, that the people in this area were all experiencing things with very bright lights.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we see that as a common theme when we talk about these encounters of like, I saw 3 lights. And so then everyone kind of sees some variation of that.
Right.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of psychological answers that could go to that. But I sometimes wonder if, like, when these things happen kind of all next to each other, if it's like the same craft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of coming back. And I don't know.
Bopping in.
Bebopping.
Checking on it.
Like, I imagined when I was first reading about this that, like, as a movie, that this spacecraft is having technical problems. And that's why it ends up, like, almost killing this guy.
Yeah.
As it's, like, trying to, like,
take off again.
And I don't know, something happens after that. But that's just, like, I saw it very comically in my head of, like, this alien in here trying to be like, why are you gonna crash? And then, like, lifts off right at the last minute.
That's what I picture with, like, how the antennas were.
Yeah.
Done.
Meow.
And that's the 45-degree one.
Well, so that's the thing, though. It was straight up, except for the tip.
Yeah, I can't put my finger that way.
Yeah, no, you can't. It's hard. We don't have that weird ability. People do.
Well, very interesting.
Yeah, I thought this was a fun little next step into our alien encounter. We now have experiences.
Yeah.
And this has a little bit of evidence. And
a little bit of credibility, I'm going to say.
A little bit of credibility. And I feel like this is the first one where people were, like, somewhat nice.
Yeah.
They were annoying.
Yeah.
Blowing up his phone all the time.
But nice. And he seemed very Minnesotan, like, oh, come on in. Let's have some lemonade.
Yes.
Tell me about your story.
100%. Midwest vibes through and through.
100%.
But yeah. So there you go. That's Val Johnson.
Wow.
And his story.
No relation.
No relation.
Well, follow us everywhere on A Scary State Podcast and A Scary State Pod.
You can email us at a scary space pop
that one.
A scary state podcast at gmail.com. And tell all your friends.
Stay scary.
Stay safe.